Welcome to the Military Spouse Careers and Business Podcast, your source for in-depth information all about the job application, negotiation, transitioning, education processes, and the unique challenges and overcoming of those challenges experienced by military spouses. You'll hear inspiring stories from military spouses all over the world who have found a way to make their career work for them and not take a back seat. Thanks so much for tuning in. Welcome back to another episode of the show. One of my favorite people in the whole military community is here today, and I'm so glad I got connected with her a couple of years ago. She's done some amazing things. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to the listeners?
Hi, I am Jamie Chapman. Thank you so much, Laura, for having me out. I suppose people probably want to know who I am. So I am the co-founder and COO of the U.S. Military Spouse Chamber of Commerce, which we proudly launched January 1st, 2021. Additionally, I'm an entrepreneur myself. I own a boutique staffing agency, and we focus on placing military spouses in careers with employers who want to give those spouses a home. So I can speak to both the traditional employment side of the house as well as entrepreneurship. Also, I'm a veteran. That's important. I served in the Army myself for 6 years.
Awesome. See, there's so much good stuff here. We have so many different directions that we could go. Why don't we start with your transition from being a veteran into building sort of a civilian career outside of that? What did that look like for you making that transition?
So I was a weekend warrior. I was in the Army Reserves for 6 years. And so I always worked simultaneously when I was a soldier. But I worked in the human capital space. I worked at a special needs vocational program in New Hampshire. And so my job was to help special needs adults find jobs. How that transitioned as I separated from the Army was that I left the service and then married right back into the Army. And so I stopped working with those special needs adults. And then I started working with soldiers in the Army. And I worked as a career coach for the transition assistance program. And then over time that evolved into, we lived in 4 different homes in 5 years. I kept losing my job and getting my job back again. And I just went towards self-employment, and I started my own business, which kind of evolved over time. I started out writing resumes for my friends, and then over time realized, well, this isn't very solvent. I'm going to try something different. So that's when I moved over into staffing. Mm-hmm.
And you definitely are an expert on resumes. I know that from firsthand experience. You helped me tremendously to make sure that mine was not a hot mess. After, of course, I didn't even think to ask the questions until after I was 30 applications deep. And I was like, no one is ever calling me. And it was like, oh yeah, that'd be my resume, and no applicant tracking systems knowledge whatsoever. So I'm always eternally grateful for that. What kind of trends did you see stepping into the staffing space and working in those sorts of career coach services? Because I know you did that for quite a while. What kind of patterns did you see, especially as it relates to military spouses?
Well, there's so many. This is a very loaded question, Laura. Trends would be, I get the disgruntled spouse. I get the spouse that's applied for 30, 100 jobs who comes to me and says, oh my God, I'm slamming my head up against the wall. What do I do? When you get to that point, it's too late. You've already been making the mistakes and then probably threw away some great opportunities. Don't wait to get help from someone somewhere before it's too late. Go early. That's the first kind of thing for a spouse, I would say. You have so many free resources at your disposal. Why not use them early? Career coaching resources, resume writing resources, anything and everything you could think of that you need help with. There's somebody out there that's doing it for military spouses for free. But then, looking at it from the employer perspective, there's a hot trend right now to hire military spouses. And so there's kind of 2 competing schools of thought. One is, don't tell them you're a military spouse because they're not going to hire you because you're a military spouse and you move a lot. And then the other one is my favorite, which is shout it from the rooftops that you're a military spouse, because these employers are creating programs specifically to attract, hire, and retain military spouse talent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so true. I feel like these issues are only just becoming really prominent in terms of discussion and studies and public policy and politicians caring whatsoever. Kind of the veteran employment and unemployment issues sort of hit first, and then gradually over time, it makes sense to people when you tell them some of the challenges that military spouses face, but a lot of times they hadn't thought about it before. They're like, oh yeah, I can see how moving all the time would be a problem and how you have to step in and out of the workforce or take on on jobs that pay way less and you are well overqualified for. So I feel like you're absolutely right. There's a lot of companies that are proactively looking for that as a way for them to give back to a community that needs it, and also to employ military spouses who make amazing employees and are very talented, and many of them are highly educated and very skilled in their various areas. So it's just been awesome to see that shift sort of happen.
Yeah, amen to that. This podcast is now over. Laura just said everything I was going to say.
No, I know you have so much more. I think we're all just so relieved that people are finally looking at this as a positive and not necessarily a negative. I think there will always be employers who don't get it. That's true of everything, right? But I think increasingly it's just really good. The amount of people who reach out to me, and I'm sure this happens to you too, to say, hey, we've just started a military spouse hiring program, or we are actively looking for veterans and military spouses to come into this industry and get training like for free or for very affordable costs. And that always makes me feel good because it feels like people actually care about this now, which is just really, really nice. So, okay, so you worked in the career space for quite a while with different military spouses. When you made the decision, well, I obviously worked with a couple of people to get the Chamber of Commerce up and going. Tell me about the seeds of that idea. You know, obviously your own self-employment experience factored into that, but what inspired you to get that started?
Well, a lot of the inspiration was the pandemic. I wouldn't have had the time or the ability to do the Chamber of Commerce if I wouldn't have took a really bad hit in my business during 2020, which is when all of this started to surface and happen. So in 2020, just for context, you know, it was the pandemic. I was also pregnant. I had a baby in June. We PCS'd in June from Germany to Texas. And so I just took a sabbatical for a little bit. And if I hadn't have taken that sabbatical, I wouldn't have been on this particular task force I was on that brought Stephanie Brown, my business partner at the Chamber, Maria McConville, the chief of staff of the Army's wife, put this thing together, this military spouse entrepreneur task force. And then I was on it. Stephanie was on it. Beth Conlin was on it, who's now our board chair at the Chamber. And we just got together at the right place and at the right time. Had my business not been struggling, I wouldn't have had time to do task force, and I really wouldn't have had time to stand up the Chamber of Commerce for military spouses. So it was a whole lot of the whole, like, you know, the door closed and the other door opened, and the timing couldn't have been more perfect in that sense. Then also, you know, just the backstory is Stephanie has had the Military Spouse Chamber of Idea Commerce up her sleeve for a while now, needed the right people. And then she had also been working on our sort of flagship service offering, which is the Military Spouse-Owned Enterprise Certification. She'd been working on that for a couple of years in tandem with the supplier diversity team at USAA to stand up what is a reputable program to certify military spouse-owned businesses. So she finally got the right people in the right place at the right time, pitched the idea to us, and Beth said, wait, isn't there already a military spouse chamber? No, there wasn't. So we made one. And then now we, rocking and rolling. Launched January 1st. 2 months later, we already have over 310 members of the chamber, of the Military Spouse Chamber. I just certified our 12th business. And then for the month of March, I have 24 more businesses to certify. So, I mean, we are rocking and rolling. I'm super busy. Now I see why nobody started a Military Spouse Chamber, because it's a lot of work.
I'm sure it is a lot of work. Yeah. And I was just thinking, like, it's on our project management board to get my company and our nonprofit through the certification process too. Like, my business manager is well aware of, like, the fact that we need to do that. So can you talk a little bit about what that means? Who's eligible to get their business or organization certified?
Yes. So think veteran-owned business, woman-owned business, minority-owned business. For the first time in history, our team at the Military Spouse Chamber has created the military spouse-owned business category. And the certification space is really stuffy space. There's a lot of old players that have been in this game for a long time. And it wasn't too long ago that veterans got accepted as a category at the $1 Billion Roundtable, which is the private sector version of, you think of the VA's veteran-owned business certifications and service disabled. The private sector has their own certifying entities, which include WeBank for women business enterprises, the minority business enterprise, and they have their own private sector veteran certifications. And so military spouses, we're coming into this as the new kid on the block into kind of a stuffy old industry that's been around. And so we have to have our certification on par with those industry standards. And that means it's actually quite a strenuous process to get certified. We need to verify 3 things. 1, that you are indeed a military spouse. 2, that your business is majority owned by a or several military spouses. And then 3, that you're a legal entity. So we need to see the documents to back that up. Right now, we're so new, we're doing it, we're kind of hand jamming this process. We're doing it via you submit your documents on a secure Dropbox that's rated for financial and medical industries. In the near future, we're getting this really cool technology where it'll be an automated process in an online portal. So you can see side by side what documents you need to submit. You can go in there, you can save it, you can come back later. And then we'll use GovX to validate that you're a military spouse. That said, we haven't got that built yet. It's being made. So right now it's the Dropbox. But yeah, so you validate that you're a spouse, that you're majority owned by a spouse, and that you're a legal entity. And then the final phase is a virtual site visit, which is where we basically go on a Zoom and you look at Jamie and I ask you a bunch of questions. In the future, it depends on what those other certification bodies do after the pandemic. But for locations with a physical, maybe a storefront, or if you see or serve clients in a home office, if you're a therapist or a massage therapist, or if you have a mobile business like a food truck, we'd need to just basically come in, take a look around, and make sure you're doing what you say you're doing in those physical locations. So it's a lot of work. But the idea, the whole reason for the certification is to legitimize and put credibility behind the name of the military spouse-owned business. And when we do that, we are essentially proving the business case that you should go into business with a military spouse.
Yeah. I love that, because I think for a long time, so many of us were targeted, perhaps with the best of intentions, but the only way you could really own a business before everything went digital was like doing multi-level marketing stuff, like selling Avon or Mary Kay. And there's plenty of people who love doing that, and it's great. But it always frustrated me that it felt like that was a default as the only kind of business a military spouse could really have, because it would be hard to have a physical location with a traditional company where you have to pick up and move every couple years. And I think now we've seen this explosion of companies that are owned by military spouses and doing incredible things, like in every different industry that you can imagine. And it's just been really unique to see that. From your perspective, what are the benefits of getting your company certified as, having this certification essentially? What does that really mean for a business in that position?
Okay. The benefits, you think of this whole industry, everybody gets their business certified as woman owned or minority owned or veteran owned or certified disabled veteran owned. It's the same idea. The reason these certifications exist is to lend credibility to the person that's going to go and get this. So if you're a veteran, if you're the minority, if you're a woman, if you're a military spouse, it's all about credibility. And the reason that you're doing this in part is because companies want to go into B2B enterprise with you. They want to hire a firm to come in and do a service for them or provide a product. And a lot of corporations will only do business with certified entities. And so by getting certified, you're opening a door to B2B enterprise. And then hopefully in time, as we advocate, we can also get the government to recognize this as well for government contracting. So we open the B2B window of opportunity, and hopefully in time, the B2G enterprise. So, legitimately, you can get it for no reason because other than you're proud to be a military spouse, and that's awesome. Or you can legitimately utilize it as a tool to open more opportunities up. And one example of that is AAFES, the Army and Air Force Exchange. They're about to start recognizing military spouse-owned businesses for coming in as a product supplier. And so in supplier diversity land, that's where we're kind of targeting is the different supplier diversity initiatives that companies can start recognizing military spouse owned. And we've provided the tool for them to do that.
Oh, I love that. So there's so many benefits to getting your business certified. It really helps with that credibility piece. It also just shows people that you're a really serious business owner. I think sometimes because so many military spouses are also women, that's not true for all of them, of course, but a lot of them are women. Maybe they might not be taken as seriously as a business owner, or, it's just harder to break in and show that you actually do a lot of work and it takes a lot of things to be the CEO of your own company and to launch any entrepreneurial venture. So anything you can do to help show the seriousness of your business, that you have a legally registered entity, that you operate just like any other business out there, opens you up to so many more opportunities, and getting to work with some of those companies or different organizations could definitely be helpful.
That's right.
Yeah. What's your vision for where the Chamber of Commerce is going? Because I know this is only one small piece of it. So what else is kind of in the big picture vision?
Okay. I forgot to say something that's so important. So first of all, who is a military spouse?
Oh, yeah. We always forget that, right? Because we have our internal thing of like, yeah, this person counts. Right?
So, okay, it's not just active duty military spouses. I want to be very clear about that. Both to become a member of the Military Spouse Chamber and to get certified. Here's who we count as a military spouse: a current or former partner of a U.S. military service member, both the veterans, those who have separated from service prior to retiring, active duty, Guard Reserve, Gold Star spouses, and caregivers.
I love that. And that's really important, because I think there is no standard definition. And I've had people ask me this before, like in the context of Operation Freelance, well, who do you count as a military spouse? And it's like, well, I haven't come across someone yet who's applied who I wouldn't consider a military spouse. We occasionally get people who say, my husband's retired and he's been out for 7 years. Can I still apply? Well, absolutely. In my mind, you're once a military spouse, you're always a military spouse. Like, you're affiliated in that way. But I do think that's important, because a lot of times we may assume that we're not included if you're not currently married to someone who is active duty, right? And
that's right.
All the way in, right? Like, so I love that you took that time to like explain what you consider that to be, because I think that increasingly that's going to be a conversation within this community. I've had conversations with people about that as well. They're like, well, what do you define that as? Who would you exclude? Like, do you consider yourself a military spouse because your husband is separated now? And I'm like, it just, and raises all kinds of interesting questions. So I think that's great. You all did that.
Another subgroup I forgot to say: if you were dual military, you were technically married to another service member. So a lot of folks that, like myself, I might identify as a veteran, but not necessarily a spouse.
Right.
If you were active duty or, dual military at some point in your career, you're technically also a military spouse. So anyway, the original question you asked, Laura, was, what does the Chamber of Commerce kind of do? What's the big vision?
Yeah.
And so just to kind of condense a big question down, think of your local Chamber of Commerce. Their mission is to support local business owners and to uplift those businesses and drive economic empowerment to the region. Well, we have the same mission. The problem is we're not a local Chamber of Commerce because military spouses are all over the dadgum place. And so we have members all over the globe. And so we're a virtual Chamber of Commerce, and we will in time plug into local places and chambers of commerce and other organizations to provide sort of a local feel to your military spouse chamber experience. But we can't be everywhere at once. So we're starting with proving the business case through our certification and garnering national recognition, both in the private and government sectors. That's kind of our first piece of the puzzle. And then we also want to create a membership experience for our members through getting the members together for networking purposes. We provide a business directory that's internal, so members can seek out to support other members of our military spouse chamber. And then also, we are an advocating entity. So as a 501c6 nonprofit, we can advocate, and we will, anything that touches the quality of life of a military spouse business owner, we want to be the voice of. And so if that's policy that we could get changed, if that's legislation that we could get changed, we want to be involved in it. Just an example of a couple of initiatives that we're working on are the GI Bill. There's a GI Bill pilot that was going on that said, hey, if you're a veteran, you can cash out your GI Bill as a business investment. And our contribution was all of, hey, don't forget about the spouses.
Yeah.
Let us cash it out too if nobody else uses it.
Right.
The AAFES initiative and trying to get military spouse-owned products in the kiosks in the front and on the shelves of AAFES. And then also AAFES uses diverse suppliers, and why not military spouses too? So a lot of different things there. Additionally, our work on the Military Spouse Entrepreneur Task Force, we became there. So we're still on that task force, and that specifically is making recommendations for SOFA overseas and for the home-based business registration process when you live on a military installation like me. So that's just a couple of the things we're dabbling in terms of advocacy. And so we welcome suggestions. If you have something as a military spouse that's a problem, come to us. We want to be able to help you with it. We want to be your voice.
I love that. It feels like this has been really needed for a while. And it just was like the timing all lined up with the right people to be able to kind of pull it together and push it forward, which is always so exciting to see. So if you were thinking about starting your own business as a military spouse, and you could go back and give yourself advice in the past, right? Like we've all made mistakes launching our businesses or learned some really valuable lessons in doing that. If you could go back in time and give Jamie advice from when she first got started being an entrepreneur as a military spouse, what kind of tips would you give her?
God, I might have told myself, don't do it. Don't do it. It's a bad idea.
It is a lot of work. Yeah.
A lot of work. And let's be honest, not every business starts out in, seven figures. We're not all rolling the dough here. Here I am in going on my 5th year of having a business. Not every year, I won't go into the whole backstory of my business, but I didn't want to make any money the first couple of years. It was just a hobby blog. Then I go in and I start my, kind of side hustle, career coaching, resume writing. Then I realized it wasn't making a lot of money. So I pivot to staffing during a global pandemic when I was pregnant and also PCSing from Germany to Texas. So I would just say it's an uphill climb. Owning a business is not easy, and not every business is going to start out where you're making a lot of money. That said, if you know that going in, most entrepreneurs, God, I'm going to butcher this quote. The Rosie Network, they did a survey to 2,000 military spouse business owners, and it was nearly 90% of those business owners reported that entrepreneurship was the right choice for them. So if you are interested in entrepreneurship, know that from other military spouse business owners like yourself, those that started a business thought it was a good choice for their family. Let me also drop one more data point in, right? The Blue Star Family Survey from 2019, 48% of military spouses reported turning to self-employment or business ownership for their careers. And so it's really important to note here that we're missing half the boat whenever we focus all of our energy on the traditional employment space. And then, in our military advocacy efforts, we're missing the other 48% of spouses that are self-employed. It's huge. And there's a really big gap in resources for military spouse business owners specifically. We get rolled up into the same hot dog as the veterans sometimes, but our needs as a business owner are so different. We're not stable. We're still moving. Anyway, so I'm just here to say the Military Spouse Chamber of Commerce is a great resource if you want to come and find resources specific to a military spouse business owner.
It's about time that we did have a place where we could go and find that, because I think you're right. We often get grouped together with the veteran owned stuff. And sometimes that's great. Like, it's great to be in that community. And it's like, it's the whole military community in general. Like, I find it to be really supportive and really great people who are all cheering each other along. But it is unique as a military spouse, because not only do you have all of the ups and downs and challenges of being a business owner, which period, those just exist no matter who you are, you also have to adapt your business ownership and your schedule based on kids and deployments and PCSing and training and sea duty and whatever else like your service member has to do. You have to be like ultimately adaptable and flexible to exist within that. And you just have unique challenges too in getting things started and getting the right resources to help you scale up. It sounds like the military spouse owned certification is a great step in the right direction. Where can listeners go to find out more about the Chamber of Commerce?
Our website, is the best place. It's milspousechamber.org. That's MIL, milspousechamber.org.
Awesome. We will put that in the show notes. Thank you so much for being one of the first guests on my new podcast. I'm so excited to release this episode and to follow everything you're doing with the Chamber of Commerce. And I got to get on my application for the certification too.
And Laura, we forgot to talk about how amazing you are. And you work with all these, I know, but all these freelancers that you're helping. And by the way, you know, at the Military Spouse Chamber, we consider freelancers as business owners. You're marketing up, you're packaging up yourself and selling your skills. So you're a business if you're a freelancer.
Yes.
So if you're here listening to Laura because you're a freelancer, then you guys we're all friends here.
Yes. Oh, I'm glad you said that, because a lot of freelancers don't think of themselves as being entrepreneurs or business owners or CEOs. And we work all the time to help people reframe that yes, you are. You have business policies. You have business bank accounts. The IRS most certainly sees you as a business owner. So claim that from day one, you know, because it is absolutely true. Yeah. One of my first episodes that I was recording a little earlier today was with one of our Operation Freelance graduates. And it was just like, I wasn't having her plug anything specifically, but I was like, I asked her about like how she got into freelancing, and it was just like the best episode. I was like, I've got to try not to cry, because she's like, Operation Freelance changed my life. And I was like, oh my God, I was like, I can't be here recording this episode. So thanks so much for all that you do to support military spouses, traditional working military spouses, and entrepreneurs. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the podcast. Our show is sponsored by Operation Freelance, a 501c3 nonprofit that helps military spouses, veterans, and caregivers break into freelance work. To learn more about that, visit www.operationfreelance.org. If you're looking to access show notes and more information about the guests you heard on today's show, please visit betterbizacademy.com.